So we met a few months ago, and Adam was kind enough to take a bunch of notes, and we're going to record this session and try to record sessions going forward. We have two folks who are going to talk about some stuff tonight. Jeff Burrell is going to talk about his project to make essentially an SCLD in an FPGA that will attach to the edge of your 2068. And that's not going to make any sense to anybody who's just stumbling across this video. And Stewart is going to talk about some of these composite video adapters that he's imported from Germany, and also I think some membrane keyboard upgrade issues, or just upgrades in general for the 1000. But we'll start with Adam talking to us, giving us a recap of what we talked about last time.
Okay, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, great. Let's see. Well, we met last time on June 29th, and I participated in the first online meeting via Zoom, and we started at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last time, so a bit earlier, although I think I like this time better, starting at 9 Eastern Standard Time. How does it work for everybody else? Pretty good? All right. There were 12 of us that met. 8 people were from the United States, 2 were from Canada, 1 was from Argentina, and 1 was from Portugal. And the subjects that we covered were, we did some introductions. I'm not sure if we'll do any more of that today. Maybe some of the new people can say hello. And again, my name is Adam. We posted some ideas of what we should cover in the second meeting, which I don't think we really ended up getting to. We talked about some of them in the 2068 group on groups.io, but I think we're going to decide that today, I think. We talked about monitor and composite upgrades for the ZX81 and the Timex 1000, kits for the ZX81 that are for sale on eBay by the meeting's host. Let's see. And also, please, if anyone has any broken 2068 computers, or I guess any other Timex computers of any sort, don't throw them away because they have really valuable parts. And that brings up, I did have a get together with someone who's actually participating today, Carl, and we got together in July, and we also got together again today for a few hours, and had a good time. And I lent him a 2068, and he may fix it, maybe not. But I think those are basically all the notes I took. And if anyone else wants to add in what we talked about and remembers a little better than me, that's what I came up with.
So Adam and Carl, Adam has a whole bunch of 2068 books, and I think a bunch of 1000 books too. And Carl's been scanning them, and they pass them along to me, and I uploaded, I don't know, 8 or 9 in the past 2 days. And I'll send a little note out about what they are. Some of them are some really fantastic books, like Sharon Zardetto-Acker's book about the 2068, which is comprehensive and not dumb like some other books are. Jeff, yes, exactly. It's a fantastic book, and that's now available to everyone on archive.org. Jeff Burrell, are you ready to roll? I'm going to make you host, Jeff, in case you need to do anything.
David, did you want to do any intros for the?
Oh, sure. Let's do that. Why don't we go around? I wonder if I can unmute. I can't unmute everybody at once, so you're going to have to unmute yourselves. Let's start with I'm going to go with my top left. Ada, you want to unmute yourself and tell us who you are? Okay. And how about the next person? Does somebody jump in?
Hey there. I'm Adam again. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and can everyone hear me okay? I'm guessing so. This is my second meeting I've been to. Obviously, it's only the second meeting. I'm a latecomer to the 2068. I first started playing around with it in about 2006 or something like that. And I have just the 2068, the Timex computer here in the United States. And with all its fuzzy picture and all that. And I hook it up from time to time because, well, I dig classic computers in general and the 2068 in particular because it's Z80 based, and I have I really like Z80 CPU, and I have a website called ballyalley.com. That's my name, which covers the Bally Arcade and the Astrocade, which was a little known game console and computer here in the United States. And that is me.
Etta, you're unmuted. You want to try?
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm an all-time Timex Sinclair fan. Going all the way back to 1984, I had bought the ZX81 in a kit farm. So I soldered and went from there. Timex Sinclair 1000, 2068 in my garage. I am supposed to have, I haven't opened the boxes for about 20 years. A brand new box of 2068 and another 2068 with all kinds of interfaces with the Spectrum emulator, micro drive, memory expansions, and all kinds of stuff. I am willing to donate. Anybody wants to take? Yours.
I was gonna say if you need to free up some space in your garage. No.
Yes,
I think anyone would be more than happy to take it off your hands.
correct. And I have tons of paper documentation.
Etta, let's talk about that because I want to scan everything I can get my hands on, or talk to Carl.
Yep.
Because he's good about scanning too. That's my goal in life right now. Leroy.
I have several 2068s. I ordered my first one, I think it was in October through the Sears catalog in 1983. I didn't get it until December of 83. And what was it, February, they stopped making them, or they stopped doing it. But I got heavily invested in it. I really liked the operating system. Ended up getting the Airco disk drive system, a couple of them. Modified it to make it do things I wanted it to do. I ventured into the QL, but I wasn't satisfied with the QL, so I got rid of both of the ones I had. That's pretty much all I wanted to say right now.
Okay, cool. Paolo? You're gonna need to unmute. There you go.
Yep, I just did it. Hi everyone. Well, I'm originally from Brazil, although I've been in the US for over 30 years now. And in the 80s, I started using some Brazilian clones of the Sinclair computers. That's where I started in the East Line, Brazil. At that time, you couldn't import legally any computer, so you had to use the clones. And I started with a clone of the ZX81. Then I started using a clone of the Spectrum. And, I used to read the magazines and see all the ads for the TS 2068. And, oh, that looked so cool at that point, and I couldn't get my hands on one of them. So when I moved here, I started looking for, the financial situation got a little better. So I started trying to get stuff that I used to desire when I was younger. So I got my first 2068, and then I got a few more. And then I bought from someone in the old Timex group. I bought a bunch of stuff. Now I have more than I can understand. I have a lot of, disk drives, and I have, all the interfaces, and everything works. And that's really nice. I've been trying to put everything to work, and everything works fine. So it's good to be back using those things and still looking for programs and still looking for software. That's the hard part to get nowadays.
Thomas Skopinski.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hi, how you doing?
So we're just doing a little bit of round robin introductions.
Well, I started getting interested in the computers when my son was in elementary school, I believe. And he got me into it. And in 1984, we joined a Timex Sinclair group on Long Island, New York. And went with that for several years until it broke up.
Very, very nice. Tim Swenson, you want to? You're a very prolific person.
Well, a bit. I do write a bit. So I got involved in the ZX81. I got it in October of bought it in October 1981. I got with the 2068. I think when it came out in late '83, it lasted maybe 6 months. The ULA died real quick. Then in April of '86, I got a QL. I was pretty much into the QL for many years, but about 10 years ago, I got back into ZX81 under emulator. So I've done writing-wise, I did a couple of newsletters, my own QL Hackers Journal. I do the SMSQ zine right now, ZX zine. The SMSQ covers QL, the ZX zine covers anything else Sinclair-wise. Also was editor for the CATS newsletter in DC. Contributed to QL Today and a few other QL newsletters over time. So you'll see my name out there.
Jeff Feta.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Jeff Feta here. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Like Ada was saying, I started with a ZX81 or ZX81, as I'm often corrected, as a kit when I was in high school. Soldered that thing together that got me through college. Still have it in some form. I have a collection of parts that I have dubbed as the original computer. Picked up the 1000s, of course, and the printers, and I have a Westridge modem for them. All sorts of collection of stuff. Got a 1500 and then later a 2068, and then got involved with the vintage computer festivals. And there's one in Chicago that's only a 4-hour drive for me. And before the year before the COVID was my first exhibit, and then I got to go again. We finally had it again in person this year. So I have, if you look for this year's, if you look on YouTube, there's a video from LGR, and he's got some good shots of my booth. I have the wooden display with all the Sinclair stuff. But the first year that I exhibited, I had the 2068, and all I had was the composite video, and it was horrible, of course. And came across David's HDMI adapter, which was actually the RGB output to the Genesis, Sega Genesis converter. And so quickly ordered one of those and had that all ready to go for this year's show. And it made it for the first couple hours, and then something happened. And come to find out, it was the TV that I was using that crapped out on the HDMI input. But works great. Got connected up with David, and we were talking. I told him the woes of that, and told him what my next project that I wanted to do, which was to tinker around with the 2068 and do a disk drive, compact flash type interface. I did one for the ZX81. This is a compact flash thing that fits into the original 16K RAM packs form factor, and then hooks into the basics. So load and save goes right to the compact flash card. And David said, hey, that's a great idea. I wanted to do the same thing. So we've been sort of collaborating for, I don't know what, maybe a month now or something like that. Exchanging documentation and hardware ideas and software programs, and tinker around with that. So that's how I got involved with this. So it's great to be here amongst people who share the same Kool-Aid from the past.
Hey, Mark Scheck. How about you?
Sure. So I'm Mark Scheck. I live in Connecticut, right down the road from Waterbury. My stepmother at the time, her brother worked as an engineer at Timex. When they discontinued, I got a whole bunch of Timex stuff to play with when I was 14 years old. And being 14, I had no money. So having a free computer was pretty cool. And I went down to the capital region. I think it was like 89. My very first computer fair was at New Carrollton, Maryland, and it was the Washington D.C. Sinclair group that was sponsoring it. And I knew a couple of the guys in Long Island too. They were a really interesting group. Got back in. Obviously, when you get older and get money, you can buy whatever you want. To my wife's dismay. Though, and I lived in Europe the last 3 years, so I don't have anything. So I only do stuff on the emulator. But I do have one thing I want to show you guys.
Tim Swenson, were you still involved in CATS at that time, about 88, 89?
Yeah, actually, that was early when I got involved. I remember that conference. We actually had Nigel Cyril there.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And if anybody remembers MTV from that same time frame,
Yeah.
Some remember his name all of a sudden. Go ahead and show the part, and I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Oh well, it's not the part; it's the
It
book.
looks like a book.
So
Looks like
it's
a
the
huge
only,
book.
yeah, it's the only thing that I have here.
David, you gonna scan that one for us, David?
You know, if you want the PDF, I will be happy to send it to you.
That's the only thing I have here, and I use the emulator for the 2068. I want to do demo scene stuff. That's probably my next thing. I'm gonna buy a TS100 and probably do some mods too.
Cool.
But time, space, and a wife that would yell at me if I bought stuff.
And just so people know too, Waterbury, Connecticut was where Timex was headquartered, for the US.
Yeah.
And also General Datacom.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. There's a bunch of weird things in Connecticut.
ColecoVision. Coleco.
Yes. Jeff Teal? Is it a hard T or a?
It's hard, and there's an E on the end. Teely.
Teely. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm in Austin, Texas, and
All right.
When I was a kid, I used to spend summers with my grandparents, and when I was 9 or 10, my grandfather bought a TS1000 to keep me busy for the summer. So that was the first computer I was ever exposed to, and the first dialect of BASIC I ever learned. A little bit later, I got the 2068, and these days I've built a few Spectrum clones, and I kind of prefer working with those because only because they're very familiar for one, but also because all the parts are sourceable now. If anything goes wrong, I can.
Yeah, it's all TTL.
Yeah. So, but my low of those go straight back to the Timex machines. So.
Rich Sutherland.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a Connecticut resident also, and 2068 fan from when they first came out. I've got a cupboard here in my office that's got quite a wide variety of things in it that's been sitting dormant for too long. So, in the back of my mind always is I want to get back into it. I always had fun with it. I've got a friend up here. He and I, were years ago would spend our nights tinkering with them and having fun. So when I got the invite to this, I said can't turn that down. I'm drawing a blank on his name. His first name was David. I can't remember his last name at the moment. I'll remember it as soon as our meeting's over. But I crossed paths once with someone who was one of the engineers in the Waterbury Timex, and he lived down that way. And years ago, back in like later 80s, he invited me down to his house, and I went down there and up into his attic, and he had, it looked like, you know, everything. There's all kinds of prototypes and one of a kind things, and he had things wrapped in tin foil to shield, you know, bleed over, all kinds of stuff. He had disk drives, you name it. He had, some of them were prototypes from the from, I guess, the Timex lab, and he'd had his fill. He'd played with it for, you know, a decade or more. So he said he wanted to get into something newer. So at the time I had a 286, an IBM 286 desktop, and he traded me everything he had for that.
Oh boy.
Oh, it was a gold mine. And then
the better part of the deal.
Yeah, and then somebody mentioned you know, space and family obligations and all of that. So unfortunately, over time, I parceled that out over eBay, and you know, got a pretty good return on it, and then regretted it later on. I wish I had kept some of those things. So I built up a collection again. Not used a lot of it recently, but even today, I put in an order for a new Zeus assembler off of eBay. Somebody's selling for $30. A fellow in New York, Zebra Systems.
That's Stewart. He's here.
Okay. Stewart, you got 2 orders for me today, then a book and the Zeus assembler. Oh, okay. And you and I talked for about an hour a couple weeks ago after I got the first book. Oh, wow, what a small world. Okay. I'm going to come out to your doorstep sometime, Stewart. And Mark, I'd like to get together with you, the fellow that lives near Waterbury. So I've got a lot of things to play with, and I'm hoping this just kind of rekindles it. And I say I'm going to make it a priority. Probably the nicest thing, or the thing I have right now that I don't know if it'll ever really have value one day, is I have a shrink wrapped, unopened TS 1000 and 2068. So wow. You know, still original shrink wrap.
Very cool.
So well, if you ever know anybody or find the, you know, like the old the bus expansion unit, you know, the mock-up maybe that they made or whatever, that would be great.
Yeah, we'd love to see
that.
Everybody would love to see that.
Because I took a picture of it, so I don't know, it's got to be somewhere, right? It's probably just a block of wood, but hey.
So thank you for sending out the email, getting this group together. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Do you plan to meet once a month, or what's the schedule hope to be?
So we'll talk about that later, but yeah, that was what I was thinking. And then if there are other folks, you know, who want to meet in an off cycle, we can figure that out too.
Okay.
Thanks. You know, Greg, how about you?
Okay, yeah, I'm Greg Bennett. I live outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. I got involved in the Sinclair stuff back in '83. I had a ZX81 kit. I didn't assemble it; someone else did. And I had several TS1000s. I always wanted a 2068, but they were short on the market and kind of just disappeared. And over the years, I collect all sorts of vintage electronics and video games and things like that. And I happened to run across a TS2068 a couple of years ago and was able to rekindle the interest. And once I managed to get a twister board and Div MMC Future, so I could run things off SD card, that was a game changer. Now I could actually reliably load things and play with it, you know, not have to try 70 times to get a good load. So that's been the thing. And I learned a lot of programming. I started actually out on Apple II, but the ZX81 was the only one I could afford. So I did a lot of stuff on that one time, you know, and had to very gently type because you didn't want the little RAM pack wobble to destroy your hour's work, or save 3 times every time you save, just in case you couldn't reload it when the RAM pack wobbled. But it got me started me on my career. I was over 25 years in the video game industry as a result of starting with that little teeny machine. Wow. So it holds a lot of memories, and I still have a bunch of my Sinclair. I have a bunch of the TS 1000s. I have actually an unbuilt kit from Stewart, by the way. The way that will never get built. It looks very cool on a shelf, and so I think it's more valuable unbuilt than it ever will be. So, but,
yeah, like some of the Heath kits. Yep.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting around. I'm still looking. If anyone knows where you can get a TS 1500, I'd really like to work on a ZX81 without any RAM pack wobble. Do your emulator, but.
There's a couple up on eBay right now, I think.
On eBay, yeah. One for
I'll have to go look. It's been a while since I've been looking for one. But, then I can type, and the keyboard, it uses the Spectrum keyboard stuff, so it's easy to replace them.
Yeah, and the Mylar. Yeah.
I'd say I have a real keyboard, but we both all know that that's only a half truth, but but
It was a real keyboard to us back then, that's for sure.
well, it's all relative, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's pretty much it for me.
Thanks. Kelly?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I got into it back when I was, I don't know, 10, 12 years old. Older brother went together with me on one with some paper route money and, bought it for $30, I think it was at the time at Montgomery Wards. They were, kind of crashing out of the market, and it seemed like a good deal. Thankfully, older brother didn't take too much of a shine to it when he figured how long he had to wait for a tape to load. So he said, the heck with that. So I ended up with that collection. I still have it down in the basement. Modded it, I think, with a joystick port on the back that just did the arrow keys, and I think we had to cut a trace on an Atari joystick, and it worked for that purpose. Yeah, picked up another one along the way, but unfortunately that one's unfunctional. I'm not sure about the status of the one I've got, but I've played around with emulators, I guess, a bit more recently, and just looking to have some fun with it again. And it's cool hearing from you all what you've been up to with all the fancier SD card stuff and everything and HDMI outputs. That sounds exciting to me. Oh yeah, I guess I'm Minneapolis, Minnesota. So just so you know what part of the country.
Francois?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm François Lancio. I'm from Canada in Quebec. I got a ZX81 for a few months before the TS1000 came out. And as soon as the 2068 was available, I got one also. But not long after, I got involved with the QL. So the 2068 went on a shelf for a couple of years. Then a couple of years ago, I got a second one. And I would say that maybe 4 years ago, I started to play with the 2068 a bit more. The idea was to make them as powerful as possible by adding stuff. And I finally managed to fry both of my 2068. And so right now, I only have one working, but only if I use it with an external interface that replace the ROMs. So I hope eventually to be able to repair at least one of them. And so that's it.
So I'm going to introduce the other person that I know to be Canadian and not too far from you, David Solly.
Oh, well, I got interested in the ZX81, but at that time it was only available in a kit. We're talking about 1984, possibly a bit earlier. And unfortunately, I didn't order a kit because I'm one of these fumble-fingered person who knows nothing for nothing about hardware and burns his fingers 9 times out of 10. But once I got a hold of it, I got interested in programming, and I'm thankful for the I'm thankful for the ZX81. Oh yeah, Z and Z are both legal. They're both legal. It depends upon, it's a regional thing. It's a regional thing. I think the British and the Canadians tend to say Z and the Americans tend to say Z, but they're both viable and acceptable pronunciations. So
finally, someone says that. Finally, it comes out. Right.
So no feelings for guilt. No feelings for guilt. But over the years, well, I became
on the color computer boards about the difference between color with a U, color without the U. Because in Canada, color is spelled with a U.
Yeah.
In a Canadian
And so
color-
is favorite and labor and a few other words.
Well, the queen wants it that way, I think, right?
Well, yeah.
Sorry to
And,
interrupt, but I just thought that was
and it was partly about the early Canadian settlers being stubborn about the way Americans do it. Well, we're not going to be like those. We're going to go our own way. So that's one reason too why a British cup measure is different from an American cup measure, and a gallon in Canada is different from a gallon in America, and this type of thing, because it was a little bit of, yeah, you think you're going to. Anyway, I became the librarian for the Ottawa Timex Sinclair user group, and as I said, I got a lot of exotic things. Whoops, I may have to turn off my background. Hold it. 1 second here while I do this.
So David has a bunch of programming manuals that are in French, because, you know, in Canada you have to put out both English and French publications.
Silly me, I thought you programmed the ZX81 in BASIC.
So David, we'll come back to you in a minute. I'm going to check in with Bob.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Can you? Oh, yeah, my name's Bob. I live in French Lick, Indiana. I back in '84, I think it was. I was 15, so I've been 83. I purchased a Timex Sinclair 1000 from a magazine, and saved up my paper route money and purchased that, and just spent hours and hours and hours painstakingly typing in programs that would eventually run out of memory and wouldn't be able to run them. And then I got a expansion pack, and then I did jump ship when I got a little older, because my dad had a friend who had an SX Commodore 64, an SX 64, the portable one, but weighed like 25 pounds and had
I believe
the
that's
keyboard
called
clipped.
luggable.
Yeah. And he bought it for, he bought it for his business.
Wasn't
and
as
didn't
big as
like
the
it.
K-Pro, but very similar.
Yeah, he bought it for his business and didn't like it, and so he gave it to me really cheap, because it was pretty expensive back then. And he gave it to me pretty cheap, and so I did that, and then I kind of got out of it. You know, went to PCs and stuff, and then a couple of years ago, TJ Ferreira on Facebook started the Timex, the Sinclair Society, and I was the first member. I saw it, and I went and joined, and because I thought, and so I've gotten back into it. I purchased a Timex Sinclair. I've got the Kickstarter too. I've got the next coming whenever it comes out.
Right. Update 14.
Yeah, I've paid for it, so you know, I'm sure. But we just got that update. So yeah, it looks like it's moving forward pretty good. And so mostly now I still mess around with the Timex sometimes, but most of it I do it on Fuse on my PC and my MacBook, and just play around writing programs. I never was big into writing programs and stuff, but I just love messing around with them, just having fun with them.
Very cool. Very cool. Senan?
Hi there. Can you hear me? Senan, I'm from Stony Creek, Ontario, Canada. So there's another Canadian on board
There's three of you.
So the Timex was my first computer. We didn't have a lot of money back then, and my mom saw that I was looking at every article, every magazine that I can get that had any information on it. And fortunately for me, her boss did frequent business trips to the US. They weren't available in Canada at the time that I was desperate for one. So she made a deal with her boss, and he brought one back with him. It cost her an entire week's worth of pay to get that for me back then. So it must have been when they were still hot on the market before they started having troubles. And that was my first computer, and that was my introduction. That eventually led me to take on a computer science degree at university. So I was quite involved with the Timex user group in Toronto. They were a big group. I probably have a whole box of their SyncLink, whatever their newsletter was called, with a lot of valuable information in there. There were some pretty knowledgeable guys at the hardware level and software. You know, along that same line of not having a lot of money to play with computers, out of desperation, another user in Dundas, Ontario, one of the only ones that were local to me, relatively local to me, was also really into the Timex. And we did some experimentation. See, neither of us could afford the modem, the 2050 modem, right? So what we did, and it was based out of naivety too. We didn't know anything about sound compression or anything along that lines, but we thought we'd give it a try. We took our telephones, took the headset and the microphone, we unscrewed them from the old-fashioned, you know, headsets, and then we punched a hole in the headset and put a headphone jack on each one of them, and then we ran that directly into the load and save jacks of our Timexes. And then on a second telephone, we'd be talking, and then we'd say, okay, at the count of 3, I'm going to hit save, so you hit load, right? And that's how we managed to transfer programs. And I can tell you, it went significantly faster than the modem could ever do. And it actually worked. It actually worked. We're probably transferring, you know, well over 1,200 baud.
Wow, that's an
So
amazing
anyway,
story.
that's my story. This, you know, it's been in a box all these years. I use an emulator on the computer just to play with it every once in a while.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in some of the new developments with the improved videos. And I've been lurking on the conversations on Groups.io and just following everybody, but I haven't actually pulled it out of the box yet and brought it out of storage.
Very nice. Very nice. Kevin Steinhaus, are you there?
I am. I kind of feel out of place. I bought my first Timex, or the 2068, about 25 days ago.
Welcome to the club.
So my first computer was an Atari 400 back in the day, and you know, then I Apple and back to the Atari 1200 XL for a while, and then you know, then wife and family and all that came into play. But I would say about 5 years ago, I started getting real interested in fixing these old Ataris online on eBay, you know, and did that, and then migrated to the the TI 99s and the ZX or the Timex Sinclair 1000, and you know, I just hit a few YouTube groups and one in particular, I think it's Noel's Retro Lab or something like that, and he's real big into the Spectrum. And then it's like, well, I'm in Minneapolis or Hutchinson, Minnesota, not too far from Minneapolis. And I just kind of got to thinking that the 2068 looked like a pretty neat computer, and it bid on one on eBay, and it was untested. And of course, it looked like somebody had plugged it in, you know, backwards, power backwards, and blew the 12-volt regulator, the 5-volt regulator, the op amp chip. So I got that one fixed. And in the meantime, I bought a second one, again, untested. And that one's got what appears to be a ULA issue. But I just really enjoy fixing these old machines and learning as much as I can about each one. Like I said, I'm really new to the 2068 world, but I've messed with the 1000s quite a bit. And I think I got 6 or 7 of them, 3 or 4 in the box, and I'd like to do memory upgrades, you know, just general putzing with this kind of stuff and learning whatever I can. Ran across Dave's website and some of his products on eBay, and it really, I guess, added fuel to the fire, and I just keep going. I guess it's just, you know, it's just fun to learn.
Very cool.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah. So now that you've had your system for 25 days and it's up and running, how long has it been up and running for?
I would say probably 23 of those days.
Oh, that's pretty good. And have you
Yeah.
had a chance to type on it? And what do you think of the keyboard? I'm curious.
I really I don't mind it. You know, like I said, I started out with Atari 400, so that was a membrane keyboard.
Yeah, no stranger to membrane clear, right?
You started with suffering.
Yep. and tape, you know,
Yes.
and tape recorder back then. So I know about record or saving things 3 times.
Okay.
But yeah, it's you know, it's real fun to play with. And what I've been doing is, you know, I got this Spectrum. I've got the Spectrum emulator thing for it. And actually what really kind of sparked me to get the 2068 is when I realized that it used the same tape format as the Timex Sinclair 1000. Because I already had the what, TZ or something like that.
Oh,
Ooh,
right.
that's but mine's not the original. Mine's just kind of a well, it's a David. It's one from David. But
yeah, this is David's. It's on loan for measurement here.
Oh, right. So that is Adam, you mentioned
Portuguese one.
one of the things that was mentioned at the last meeting was potentially making a 3D model of the cartridge. And so Jeff volunteered to work on that suffering.
Sweet.
Wait,
and I work for a 3D printing company.
Oh, that's right. You do, Mark. I forgot about that.
So the downside of doing the model, not to get too distracted with that, is it is significantly larger than these guys. I mean, the cartridge is tiny compared to that. So if you want to actually put something in the cartridge, it's going to have to be all surface mount and probably hard coded stuff. So
yeah.
But it'd be great to have the casing so that we can make our own, you know, because you could put a you know, megabyte or a 2 meg chip in there, right? And how many ROMs could you put in there? You know what I mean? And you could just program it, build a programmers that you plug into the edge card. Somehow program it that way, right? That way you don't have to open it up again. Anyway,
you could put them all in.
Thank you. Yeah.
Louis?
Hey folks, Louis.
Louis, sorry.
No problem. I'm located in Sunnyvale, California, and my exposure to the Timex Sinclair is from Argentina. Back in 1986, after we were done here in the US with the Timex Sinclair, they dumped a bunch of them in Argentina. I, of course, used it for a little bit in Argentina. I came back to the States. In the late 90s, I started doing a bit of retro collecting, and I picked up another copy of a 2068, which I still have. Like many, I'm sure, it's been in a box in the garage, and I pull it out and I look at it and I pet it, and then I put it back in the box. So I haven't actually started up mine in quite a while. I did stand up the original TimexSinclair.org website, and I was the moderator for a lot of the lists until last year when Yahoo killed everything off. So it's nice to actually connect with everybody in real time. I've seen many of your names over the decades, and so that's kind of everything about me.
And that's why I picked on you, Louis, is because I knew about your website. Hey, Willie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, guys. Sorry about no video, but yeah, I'm here.
That's okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Just fine.
Yep. Anyway, I'm Willie Jones. I'm in Martinsville, Indiana. Been a Timexer for many, many years. Like most of these guys out here, I built my first one back in the early 80s. Just got hooked on it really quick. Ended up going to the 1500 because of the re-impact wobble that everybody's experienced with the 1000 and stuff. Went from the 1500 to the 2068, which I've got 3 or 4 of those now. I really like the 2068. I've got a few Sinclairs. I've got a TS 2048, which is kind of cool. It's basically a Spectrum 2068. So, but yeah, I've been around for a long time. Then I kind of got out of it for several years. We moved about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was going through some totes and stuff in the garage that I had not unpacked for 6 years, and ran across all my Timex stuff again, and kind of dove back in it. Got on David's website and found that there were still several people out there messing with them, so kind of stirred the old juices and got me going again on it. And I play with it every night. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm hooked on this thing.
I love it.
Got quite a few things, David. I was involved with the ISTUG Sinclair users group way back in the day. Co-writer of ISTUG BBS that myself and Paul Holmgren put together. I hosted that for about 2.5 years for the user group. That was a blast. Did a lot of stuff with that and the JLO floppy interface. I love the JLO system and use it to this day. But we had the BBS to where it would actually load all the messages and everything on and off of his disk system without anybody even being around. It's pretty cool. But, those didn't last too long. The BBS has kind of died out. And kind of miss those days, but that was a lot of fun.
Darn internet.
That's pretty much. Yeah, there you go. But that's kind of my story. Everybody else can see me out there. I'm poking around every once in a while, but yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Willie.
Oh, I will say I've got to get some more stuff to David. I've probably got about close to 4,000, 5,000 pages of archived newsletters.
Wow.
That we used to swap with the other user groups. I sent maybe 1,000 or 1,500 pages to David to see if he could use any of them. And I think he said he didn't have any of those particular ones, but I've got a bunch of that stuff to share with everybody, and a lot of the GLO. I got his original manual and some stuff like that should probably come in handy for some of us. But anyway, that's kind of it.
Thank you, Willie. We got.
May I ask a question, Willie? So you have
absolutely.
Yeah, you have all that documentation and stuff that you shared with other user groups. Do you find that maybe at the time when you were like exchanging that information that you were getting like stuff for like the bulletin board system that you set up that you wouldn't have found elsewhere, like in the magazines or any books? Like, were you able to talk to people that way and get some information, like inside information?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of good information in these newsletters. What we did find though is, once they kind of got up and going, and this was in, the early 80s, mid 80s, and there was, I want to say we were we were partners with probably 25 different user groups.
Wow.
At the time where we automatically sent them our newsletter and then they sent us theirs. And you would see a lot of articles that would be crisscrossed and some of them across, over time, but almost every single one of them had something that you didn't have. So yeah, there's a lot of good information out there. QL 1000 Spectrum. The neat thing was it kind of covered the whole gamut. So there's a little bit for everybody. And
yeah.
Even today I find articles that I didn't see or I didn't read or whatever, because after a while I get tired of reading.
Well, I hope those get to archive.
Yeah,
That'll be
there's a lot of cool stuff.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I hope that does get archived because I'm also into some of the Atari computers, and I found over the last, few years, I've been going through some of those newsletters, and I find the articles you read there are much more personal, and you get an insight into almost like the scene. Like, let's say if it was one from Albuquerque, and I was trying to find, because David's site has a list of some of the user groups that were around here, and there was one in Albuquerque, but I I don't have anything. I think Carl might. He did some of the newsletter stuff for them, but I don't know too much of what if he's. Do you still have that stuff, Carl?
Yeah, I think I have it somewhere. I'll have to take a look. But yeah, I ran the Timex group here in Albuquerque when I was a kid. So
how many people were members of that?
it was a handful, man. I'd say maybe a dozen.
Well,
Was Al Fang in Albuquerque?
I'm sorry?
Was Al Fang in Albuquerque? This is more towards Carl.
Name doesn't ring a bell, but I've slept a lot since then. So
okay, because he did some QL stuff, and I thought he was from that general neck of the woods. So.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't really get into the QL, not our group, but like I said, yeah, that doesn't ring a bell for me.
Most of the Sinclair groups I was doing covered everything, whether it was the East Bay or the CATS group, and some of the ones in New England also knew they covered all the different computers.
Yeah, and I know what you talk about, the newsletter exchange. That was a common thing with user groups. Yeah, that's how everybody got information around, because you couldn't really get what you wanted out of the magazines. They were tailored to certain things, and yeah, these things, they're just nuggets of information in all of those things, man. So yeah, it'd be great to archive it.
Well, remember also when Timex died in February of '84, all the magazines died also.
Yep, right away.
Yep. So we've got about 4 more people, and then I want to get to Jeff and Stewart. So Al, can you quickly give your mini bio?
Mini bio. Well,
David has a book too. I think he was trying to show because he had his background on.
So let's go ahead, Al.
Well, I bought a TRS-80 Model 1 at the end of '78. And my first exposure to Sinclair computers, because it wasn't Timex yet, it was just Sinclair, was at the Trenton Computer Festival, either 80 or 81. And I was looking for a disk drive for my TRS-80. And Stewart was there selling, this is pre-Zebra, selling something called the music box and the rhythm box. And you would hook those up to your TRS-80, and you could play music and do drum. You could play drums.
Oh, that's crazy.
Across the way from Stewart was a table, and they were selling these ZX80s. And I either could have spent $200 on a ZX80 or $320 on a disk drive. Stupid me bought the disk drive for $320. And when I got home, it didn't work right. And we could never get it working. It was just basically went straight to the garbage pile because it was never working right. And to this day, I kick myself for not buying a ZX80. But I met Stewart back then, and through various business dealings with my TRS-80 and in the Radio Shack color computer market, I went to work for him at Zebra Systems. And Stewart had given me a ZX81 kit to build. He says, you got to learn something about these computers if you're going to help me sell them. I took the kit home and I built it in an hour. And I plugged it in and worked for first time. And I don't have that computer anymore. I gave it back to Stewart, built and running. And I think it got sold to an unsuspecting Zebra customer. But working at Zebra, I got exposed to all the different models of the Timex Sinclair units, including the Timex Portugal units, because we were importing things from Timex Portugal. So we had gotten a TC2048, a TC2068, the disk systems. We were selling the Westridge modems. And one of our programmers in-house wrote a terminal program for it that was better than the one that came with it. We called it Z-Term, I think. And it was just a lot of fun interacting with all the customers, the Timex customers. And this was all through the 80s. And Zebra stayed in business even after Timex went out of business, because Stewart was able to buy remaindered items, books and computers and peripherals. When Timex went out of business, a lot of the big stores that were carrying the computers just returned all the stuff, and they went to Stewart will tell the story better than me, but they went to a guy in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, who had a big warehouse, And Stewart would just go, and it was like a kid in a candy store. And he'd pick a pallet of this, a pallet of that, a pallet of that, 20 of those. And that was how we kept stock at Zebra. Besides the products, like Stewart made a joystick interface, he made a keyboard beeper. Every time you hit the key on a keyboard, it would beep. I can't think of a lot of different add-on products for the ZX.
A lot.
I still have
Yeah, Stewart.
I still have a keyboard beeper to this day.
Yeah, I was gonna say Stewart's head barely fits into a screen now.
I have a 2068 that I bought 15 years ago on from someone on one of the lists. I have a Timex 1000. I have somewhere, I can't find it yet, the ZX Spectrum, an NTSC Spectrum, not the PAL Spectrum. And what else? I don't know. I have a Timex printer. I have a bunch of things.
Very
and
cool.
I have one of what's his guy? The guy that made the Spectrum clones.
The Harlequin.
The Harlequin, yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
I bought one of his twisters with the Spectrum emulator chip on the twister.
Yeah.
I have one of those. And then I was talking to a guy, and he made the logic boards. Someone showed one before for the cartridge board.
Right.
I was buying those like 20 at a time from Osh Park because trying to get the price down for people. And people were using those with various different chips. And there are videos on YouTube from him. I can't think of his name. And videos, I put 2 videos up from Zebra. Zebra was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal Report and the New Tech Times.
Right.
And they're hilarious because Stewart recorded them on beta. Then he transcoded them over to VHS. And then my friend Tom, who worked at Zebra also, he took them off of VHS and put them onto DVD. And then I uploaded those to YouTube. So they're up on YouTube. If you look for Zebra on TV, you'll see vintage Zebra systems being interviewed by the New Tech Times.
Very cool.
And the Wall Street Journal Report. And those were the days. I miss those days. I would have had a lot more fun if I had taken that stick out of my butt back then. But
real quick, Al, how did you get a Spectrum with NTSB? I didn't think they actually made them that way.
It was a sample. What happened was Timex, before the 2068 came out, were going to release the Timex 2000. And those cases are what became the 1500. But because they didn't meet FCC requirements, they had to re-engineer the computer. And while they were doing it, hey, I got a great idea. Let's ignore all the software and the hardware in the UK for the Spectrum, and let's make a totally incompatible computer that has a different expansion bus, uses the joysticks differently, has a slightly different basic, and we'll call it the Timex Sinclair 2068.
Oh, it's not completely incompatible. It runs about 1% of the stuff.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem with this. I don't see a problem at all.
And the printer, you can use the printer.
Yeah, you can use the printer. You just got to be careful what you plug into the expansion port.
The ports
So
changed.
Stewart ended up with a prototype of the NTSC Spectrum. But, you know, Timex Portugal was probably selling NTSC Spectrums in different countries in the world because some countries still used NTSC televisions rather than PAL or CCAM.
Right. Tim, there's
I
a
have
couple
one
of those.
somewhere. I just have no clue where it is.
There's a couple of
one in a microdrive.
Tim, there's a couple of those things floating around. There was a guy named Eric Johnson who got a bunch of stuff from a relative of his at Timex, and a friend of Eric's inherited his stuff and sent some of it to me just recently, and there was one of those NTSC Spectrums in that box.
Yeah, I thought it might have been so Bob Dill a while back ran the English Micro Connection where he imported Spectrum's stuff.
Right.
So I wonder if maybe he had done something like that.
It's got a different ULA in it.
Yeah, it's an NTSC ULA. That's the main difference. That and the crystals.
Right. Right. So
I remember the English Micro Connection because I was dying for them to make twisters, and they never did. And at Zebra, we prototyped the twister. The first one didn't really work that well. It also had an RGB interface. It had some other things on it, but it didn't end up going into production. And then I think we made a Stewart and a Tom, and I don't know who else, made a smaller twister that we sold with the disc systems.
I think so. We're going to move on.
I think I should go next because this is a logical
Yes,
sequence.
go right ahead.
Yeah, because Al has a way better memory than I. I forgot that I met him at Trenton Computer Festival, actually. And I practically forgot that I had actually put my toes in the water of coming out with, I did come up with a few projects before Zebra Systems, a music board that went on old, Z80 based computers. And, but at any rate, I came to the Timex different than most of you, or probably all of you, in that I was already 36 years old and had 4 different engineer. I'm an electrical engineer by education. I went to Rutgers and I had 2 aerospace jobs. And the third job was actually designing high-rise fire alarm systems for ADT security systems. Ironically, on the North Tower of the World Trade Center, 92nd floor. I was actually coding that in assembler on an 8088 before the Z80. It's actually in a 12K RAM, writing software to control elevators, public address systems, for fire alarm systems in high-rise buildings. And then I had one more job at a silver plating company in the Bronx. And then somewhere I connected to people who were working on the COCO, the color computer, maybe through Al. I don't know how I made the connection. They said there's an opportunity. They were making hobby electronics to support the color computer. And they said there's an opportunity to do the Timex ZX80, the TS1000. So I actually left. I loved my employer at I was a plant manager for a silver plating place in the Bronx, and I put in a silver plating line, but I went to do what I love, which is design electronic circuits. So I was already 36 years old when I started Zebra in 1983. I designed a text-to-speech board, a keyboard beeper, joystick, a bunch of things like that. Sync magazine was our lifeline to the world. This is a mail order company for the internet. So we took out eventually full page ads every month in Sync. And a week later, we would get checks in the mail, and had a total of 5 people. Al, who had a good background in the hobby computer world, personal computer world, and also was active on a bulletin board, a very old bulletin board of the days. And this fella, Tommy, I guess a friend of Al's. Is that how I met Tom, through you? Yeah. Anyway, to not take forever, what was, I'd say, very unusual for this whole circumstance of my life and Timex is that, only 2 years into this, Texas Instruments wrecked so many businesses because their business model was, we're going to make it cheaper and better, we'll take over the industry. And one industry after another, they sort of drove the price so low that no one else could make any money, including them. And then the market just crashed. So they did that in digital watches, they did that in calculators, and they sort of were I think they were the first one to kind of kill the hobby computer with the TI-99 computer. But anyway, that was their business model. But I was lucky, this previous employer, where I was a silversmith, I had just worked on a 35,000 square foot plant with loading docks, could put 2 40-foot trailers in there with loading docks, and we had forklifts. So when people started to dump books and other items from the Timex world, I actually had a place to put it without paying any rent. So like, this book I'm still selling today, The Ins and Outs of this TS1000 ZX81, I called Melbourne House and said, what are you getting rid of? And he said, well, you could have the book, but the catch is you have to take the pallet. But they were 10 cents a piece. So if I took 2,000 books, that was only $200. And they could deliver it. And I had the space. They just take the forklift, take the pallet off and store it for me. So one of the freakish things is that even though, and I continue to at least keep this storefront with 5 people going in the hobby market by doing some crazy stuff like that. We bought about 10,000 Wiko trackballs, and they were for certain model hobby computers, and stopped to sell. And with some minor modification of the board inside, we could sell them for another another computer that was still going on. So I did that, but eventually it just didn't make financials. I wasn't adept enough to find something else to do, and I closed the storefront. One of the freakish things that happened that accounts for why I'm selling stuff today on eBay, and I have a lot of stuff to sell on eBay, is when I had Zebra, I was buying kits, ZX81s in kit form. I don't actually remember selling them individually to people, although I may have. Al would know better. But my clients for these were technical schools, tech schools that, not colleges, but tech schools that were teaching technicians how to repair photocopiers, dumb terminals, and things like that. And they would have them build the kits to learn to identify components, solder, follow instructions. When I offered to make the instructions better, they say, no, we don't need more pictures. The whole idea is to get them to read, follow instructions. Well,
yeah, that was the Albert Merrill School in Manhattan.
Yeah, I sold them to Albert Merrill, one of the schools in Manhattan, and they would buy them. I don't know. I didn't make a fortune on them, but I think I sold them for $20 or $30. I was getting them for less. I couldn't get them anymore for a number of years, and Zebra, pretty much was surviving on income from something else. When somebody from England called and asked if I would like to buy a lot of 3,200 kits from England, they were really cheap. I had to pay as much for the air freight as for the kits. And I got them and I put them into, at that point, my storage was no longer in the Bronx. My brother was in Pennsylvania, where storage is a lot cheaper than New York City. I rented the biggest truck you could rent without having a commercial driver's license. It was filled with cubes of 33 kits per yard square box, cardboard box. I took them out to Pennsylvania and I rented 2. Well, initially my brother had storage in the stereo store, but I eventually got a 2 10 by 20 foot garages in the storage park. And I put that there, along with all the other leftovers from when I cleaned out my my Zebra Systems storefront in Queens. So at any rate, it turned out once I got them, there was no Sync magazine or any other Timex magazine. There was no internet. I couldn't sell them. The schools decided by then they had already switched to building multimeters, radios, different things. And they said, well, we'll start with you and you'll run out again. And so we're not interested. So they literally sat there for a number of years. Then fortunately, I found the internet started. I found a few users groups. I sold some. Then later in 1998, I sold my first one on eBay. And basically, these were what filled the 2 garages mostly. I mean, when I got the kits, I said, oh, well, I need stuff to go with the kits. So I didn't have the original manual. I bought enough books to go with 3,200 kits. The original power supplies didn't have plugs. I found the source for the exact power supply, US power supply. And I bought enough power supplies to match it. I tried to match it. I did make one trip to Memotech, as well as Timex in Portugal, same trip actually. when they were getting out of business, and I bought a few hundred Memotech modules, mostly 16Ks, but some 32Ks, etc. Any rate, for decades, the kits were kind of a trust fund. I sell $10,000, $12,000 of kits every year on eBay. You know, starting at $30 and $50 and $100. As time went on, I got lucky. Some things become worthless with time. Like I just threw out like 5 laptops that were about 9 years old in my apartment that are garbage. They went into the trash. But luckily with me, this is, you know, people are fascinated with. I was fascinated with it because I thought 5 chips, you know, I in high school, when there were vacuum tubes in my days, if you were electronics, I wanted to be a hobbyist, electronic hobbyist. So I thought a computer that comes out with 5 chips, that's cat's meow. So I learned about it, etc. So now what's happening going forward, and the weird reason I have a variety of things on eBay is first now in 2021, is that by far the bulk of the 2 garages was full of these big cubes, to the point where you couldn't navigate around and find out what else was left. Recently, got it down to, I have less than 100 kits left. I think I have 50 or 60 left somewhere. The only reason it's not a great count is it's in Pennsylvania. It's like a 5-hour drive that I don't make very often. If we're here, I tell you exactly what I have. But only recently did we actually organize it. My brother closed his stereo store, so there's clutter in the place from him. Only recently have we got it under control, like about a year ago, to start looking at what's the miscellaneous stuff, you know? Also, I think somewhat because of the pandemic, I, during all those years, never turned on a ZX81. I would just sell the kits. At the beginning, people used to build them. Then nobody pretty much builds them. It's a collectible. The price is now up to like, the last one I sold, I've been selling them for $300 for the last year. The last one went for $400. Wow. But now I've decided, and partly because of the pandemic and being home a lot and retired, that I'm actually playing with the ZX81 and 1500 and to a lesser extent 2068. And I have an interest in designing some peripherals. So I've decided I'm in no hurry to sell off the remaining kits. I'm gonna sell 1 a month till they're gone, which could still be 40-ish months or something. I'll get more money that way, and mostly it's just to fund hobbies and stuff. But also I've taken a different focus. I realized playing with it myself that the video sucks if you don't modify it. So, and the keyboard certainly could be better. And so I started in the last 3 months or less importing currently made things. There's no point in just, I have some projects that I want to design that haven't been done, but a lot of things that are done, there's no point designing. So I started about 3 months ago importing the ZX8 CCB composite video adapter for the ZX81. It's really a nice little board. And, you know, I've been keeping every time I sell something on eBay for the last decade or more, it goes into my QuickBooks. And I can tell you, the people buying these adapters are not any of the customers I sold anything to in the last 10 years. So I'm dealing with people who are not as much collectors. They want this book to collect, or maybe to read, or a kit to collect. These are active users. They want to put the adapter on their computer and really use it. And that's also what connected me a little, a few months ago when we had to look around and find David Anderson's website that's so comprehensive, and then this Facebook group, etc. So I just started selling, what I did is I put together the little board itself, the little board I get from Germany. And I installed a few on TS1000s and ZX81s different ways in the modulator housing, outside the modulator housing. Since I've started selling them, and I've sold like, I don't know, 20, people sometimes give me, sometimes I never hear from them. I don't know if it worked or not, but a lot of times I get something back or I have a follow-up and I get to ask. And everyone I've talked to has succeeded in putting it in. And there must be a dozen different variations on the way these people install these, not just the couple I gave out. But I decided to bundle it with some jumper wires and an extra RCA, video jack for those people who don't want to use the one in the modulator. Because some people, if you do it that way, you don't have to take the board. You don't have to, you take the bottom off the ZX81, and you do not have to take the board off of the top and risk cracking the fragile membrane keyboard. Some of them got fragile. As a matter of fact, Al came out with Tommy about 5 years ago when I was trying to get clutter out of my storage space in Pennsylvania. Tommy had a van, they came out. I ordered a dumpster, I think a 10 cubic yard dumpster. And I don't know how many hundred ZX81s.
Oh, please don't tell the story. It just makes me cry.
Yeah, that I had ordered. I not only ordered these kits, but I ordered almost all the spare parts that were left in, I guess it was Connecticut, for repairing ZX81s. Because a lot of times people would build a kit, they never soldered in their life, and they would send them back because the kit didn't work. And I don't know how they dealt with it, but I had ones that got repaired, ones that were not repaired. I have tubes of ULAs, that were not pulls, that were just never put anywhere, and other chips. Well, anyway, Tommy just said, well, all these membrane keyboards on the ZX81s, they're all cracked. We should just throw these out. We had 30 ZX81s per box about this big, and we just tossed them about 5 years ago. Now that I'm looking at what's going on, people are making new membrane keyboards. and even if some of those ZX81s were not NTSC, I think they were all in the States. They were all in shielded silvered shells. But anyway, we threw out stuff that is kind of frightening to think of, but
we need to do the archaeology project like they did for the
Atari,
the ET
Yeah.
game for Atari, and track down which landfill your dumpster ended up in.
Well, the one for Atari was here in New Mexico, so.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, Tommy also took in his van of stuff I was giving away, a bunch of stuff, because he has a suburban house in New Jersey. He took a lot of stuff. I mean, I had stuff that wasn't only, I had other surplus electronics that he got rid of. We had some sound chips that did very well. He sold the ICs. But I kept telling Tommy in recent years when I started to sell stuff, I said, Tommy, this stuff really sells. These Memotech sell, you should put them up. He never had any, it wasn't priority for him. And this summer, Tommy came back and gave me the Timex stuff that he'd never had any patience to sell. And I saw stuff I had not seen since the 80s. He gave me like a dozen of those Timex carrying cases for the TS1000. That kind of
saw them on eBay.
And I'm selling them on eBay now. And he also gave me certain book titles that I had run out of or never forgot we had. So all of a sudden I have new stuff because we organized the warehouse and we're getting to the stuff that was at the edges. So certain book titles are up there. The other thing that's going to happen is I realized I have a bunch of I'm enjoying so after the video adapters from Germany, this guy Carl at his website in Germany is
Pokemon something.
Ginger Electronic. You can go to Ginger Electronic video.to and buy the same thing directly from him. But it takes about 2 weeks to get to the US. And so, and you know, I'm enjoying supporting the community doing this. So I started with, he's got, he makes replacement keyboards that are not just membrane. I don't know if everybody's aware of them. So I started selling those. His engineering is terrific. I mean, his designs are really solid. So I'm gonna just hold one up. So I've got them. I've only put up the ones, a few for the ZX81, but here's one similar structure. So I get them as a printed circuit board. They're, you know, tactile switches. Each one is a little clicky, where's the camera? Switch. You know? So I get them like this without this. He sells them where people solder their own, but I figured I'll solder these. They'll be perpendicular to each other, etc. So all I do is I solder the ribbon cables on them, and he has them with overlays. So the only one I put on eBay is the one for the ZX81, because it's the only one I used and tested. So here's a ZX81, a US version with the channel 2-3 switch. And I put this keyboard on, and it looks just like the keyboard. Of course, the function, it says new line instead of return. But other than that, it could be replaced for the TS1000. And the click is great. They really feel good. So between having modded his video and his keyboard, it's a very much more enjoyable computer. The product I'm next looking for to complete the thing would be a tape replacement, a tape loading replacement. So I'd love to get the opinion of this body, this knowledgeable body of Timex users, of what product I should either try to import or build or design or whatever. But it would be great. And you know, you would think in this day and age, somebody would have an app for your iPhone or your Android phone. But anyway, I can get a signal generator on my phone for free, you know, a sine wave generator. So there's a project there. The other thing I just discovered is that you would expect, this isn't shocking, but it's very convenient. I started, instead of lugging out this old TV, you know, I think it was over a year ago, I asked Al, I need a TV. I can't even test these old computers and get a decent signal off them. And he told me a model, and I found it on eBay, and I bought an old TV, and I've been using that. But now that I mod the videos, I started doing this. I feed them into one of these AV to HDMI converters, and then I just use my computer screen. You know, I use my HDMI. So that's really nice that the signal is compatible enough that these like $6 converters, and then I don't have to pull the TV out. I can use any size like monitor, and it's pretty good result. So that's where I'm kind of at. I have overlays for the spectrum.
Are those the ones from Pokemon that he sells from Pokemon, the ZXCCB, the composite mods?
Yeah.
I had bought some of those. Are the ones that I ended up settling on. Those things work great. Yeah, those are fantastic.
Yeah, they really work nicely. And they're very, very thin. So there's lots of ways to put them on top of the modulator or on the board without opening the modulator board. You can sneak them in anywhere, which is also nice. But it gives a very clear picture. I'm quite pleased. So he's got overlays for the spectrum. And of course, you could use this to, well, you could use this if your cover is good, you could replace a TS1500 or a Spectrum and use the rubber caps that are on that. If they happen to be for some reason ruined, in the case of the Spectrum, he actually has an overlay that I have. Now, I haven't put them up to deal with the Spectrum market, which I would imagine is non-existent or minuscule in the United States. only because I never actually owned and do not have a Spectrum. So I hate to kind of like have to support something that I've never done.
Well, you have
pulled
a 1500, Stuart. So it's,
Yeah, I
you
just
basically have
pulled-
the, yeah.
Right. I just pulled a few 1500s because I'm sure at least one, I remember at least one or two probably don't have working keyboards, and I'll use them as my excuse to swap that.
Because I think the same guy or maybe somebody else makes the same type of board, but they have LEDs in there because they have the transparent overlays, right? So you can make it so that they're backlit. They have, you know, different LEDs for the different keys. Anyway, but it kind of gets ridiculous. But yeah, there is that kind of stuff out there.
Yeah, if you're, for some reason, your keyboard isn't good, like this actual overlay can go on it. You know, he does sell the overlays. Anyway, that's enough, more than enough. But I'll just add one more thing. The kits are, you know, my biggest revenue, and I certainly like money. So I enjoy selling the kits and getting a lot of money. You have to sell about, I don't know, $20, $15 books or something to get the same amount of money. But I enjoy going to the post office. I feel it's a nice service to the community. It's fun. But I've hesitated to start selling like ULAs and other spare parts I have, mostly because almost everything I sell can't go bad. Like you can't get a bad rating on the eBay selling a book that's really new. I mean, what could go wrong with it? And the kit is a kit, and they're in great shape. I often get feedback like, it really is new, or I can't believe it, or it's a time machine, or I get all these comments. But that's next year. And after 6 months in the winter in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, I'll go to my summer cottage again where I have room. And the project for next year will be going through, I still have some boxes of 30 ZX81s per box, not a lot. I think when I look at the prices people ask for TS 1500s or TS 1000s on eBay, untested, I think there should be a pent up demand for people who don't have one and would like to get one, but not only untested, but working with the video mod and 16K already installed, ready to go, maybe even with the keyboard. So my project, I think for next summer, when I'm out of my small apartment, will be to go through some of the remaining stuff, make and sell working products for people.
I think your opportunity is right now though, because Clive just passed away.
I know that.
There's a resurgence in interest in these machines, and as soon as he died, the prices just skyrocketed on eBay.
Okay, well, I didn't know about that. But,
yeah, anything Sinclair went through the roof.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
it's just gonna have to wait because I can't put another room, and I you know, they say happy wife, happy life. I'm already pushing it. What do I have? I just have a 1-bedroom Brooklyn apartment, so it's not going to happen. But anyway, I think that I'd enjoy, you know, doing some mods. And also, if there's people out there who do repairs and want to talk to me about like ULAs, I have test jigs that we built in the 80s to test ULAs. So I just got to get them out of a box. I got them and test ULAs and I have spare parts. Yeah. And
I've seen also someone's now come out with a FPGA version of a ULA. So they've got a 4-pin printed circuit board, sort of like the teensy form factor, if you're familiar with that from with the Atmel.
No, I think I've seen that.
Except it's actually an FPGA, and it's based on I think some of the disassembly from the decapping that I forgot the guy's name who did the Spectrum ULA book.
Right.
So
Anyway,
I've taken more than enough time. I think you have a couple of people left. But
I do.
Come back to your recommendations for what are the most common solutions for tape loading.
Right. So Jeff has an excellent solution for that. Jeff, Burrell, are you there? We can see your circuit board.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I had you muted, so
That's okay.
my mouse thumb doesn't work as well as it used to. So I'm Jeff Burrell. I live just outside Minneapolis in Coon Rapids, so getting ready for wintertime. What was it, David? About 3-4 weeks ago, you had asked whether or not I'd be willing to do a demonstration, and that's the kick in the pants that I needed to actually get started on this. The hardware's been built, but as one of my managers used to say, I can program, but only when backed into a corner like a rat. So, you can see the printed circuit board that I've built, and basically down in here are the level shifting bus buffers. This is the FPGA board that I'm using. Sitting up in here is a serial chip that I'm using for development, and there's a SD card interface, the VGA interface, and then down here is where the real-time clock chip, well, the real-time clock module will go, and then there's a little bit of serial RAM under there, or serial EEPROM. Below the FPGA board is a 1 megabyte SRAM and a 4 megabyte flash. So that's kind of what's going on in there.
What does it do?
What's that?
Right. So Jeff, not everybody was at the last meeting, and so they don't know what you're doing.
Oh, I'm getting things are upside down on my screen. Are you guys seeing?
It looks good for us.
It looks good for us.
Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm designing an interface for the 2068, and one thing I wanted to do was make the video better, and apparently I've been able to get that done. Also, I wanted to add some other capabilities to this interface. One of them is to have different ROM images that can be loaded, and some other things just to increase the capability of the machine. And Jeff Fetta had mentioned that you've been working on an interface with SD card, or is it SD card?
It's a module that handles all of the DOS level work on a USB device.
Yeah, it's a single chip. I think it's an 8051 core. So it's a CH376 is the device. It's got all the USB bulk, all the USB interface stuff, and so it does the mass storage device class. So you can plug thumb drive, card readers, whatever you want in it, and then it's got as David said, it's got the fat file system in it. So you talk to it through I/O ports, but it's a very high level command like open a file or read the directory, that sort of thing.
Okay, it sounds like a few Ethernet chips I've used in the past where all that machinery is in a different processor.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what you can see on the screen right now is the output to my VGA monitor, and what I've done is I've loaded the basic 64 for the 2068, and basically this is to show that right now the video stuff is working properly in the 64 column mode, and I'm going to reset the computer.
Jeff, you're snooping the bus to catch the bus write or the memory writes to the display file, right?
Yes, I am, and there's a lot more stuff going on in there. I have a memory management, or a memory mapper, and some other things. But yeah, I'm monitoring writes to ports FE, FF, and F4, so I can get the horizontal status and all the other stuff that I need. So at any rate, right now this is the boot screen that you see when it comes up, and you can see there's the standard 2068. You can boot into that. You can boot into 2068 Plus. Now that's kind of a conceit on my part. The only thing that I've done in the 2068 Plus ROM is to modify the X ROM so I can use a high-speed serial bus to download programs from my computer. I did put a Spectrum 48K, a Spectrum GW ROM. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. That's ROM's big claim to fame, is that it allows you to type things, type commands in letter by letter rather than have to hunt and peck on the keyboard. And then also the TC2048 ROM is here as well. So if I select, and then at the bottom there's flash management. I have a PC application that talks via the serial port that allows me to erase and reprogram the flash on this board so I can download these images. And so now I've selected the TS2068+2 boot screen, and I've modified the sign-ons so that I know what's going on. I have this hooked up to my PC, so now I can download, I happen to like Frogger, so now I can download Frogger.
From the PC?
From the PC. And
well,
now,
I have a question. Do you mind if I ask you about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the format that you're loading, are these like disk images or like converted TZX?
These are TAP files.
Okay.
I don't really want to. I've looked into the TZX format, and it's really a hassle to deal with, especially if you're just downloading data. But it came down from a TAP file.
So it's emulating a cassette, basically. Then is that how?
Not really. What it's doing is I have a PC application that reads a TAP file, gets the headers and all that other stuff, and basically the XROM in my 2068 Plus has routines that just request data and send data back and forth. I can also write a program on the TS2068 and shove it up to my PC drive as a way of getting fast storage.
Okay,
and
thank you.
The reason I put that in there is primarily so that when I start doing development, I don't have to futz around with tape or some other things. So as you can see right now, the Frogger screen is up, and the quality is not too bad. So it's a lot better than the native 2068 video.
Well, anything pretty much is better.
I was
Never
saying,
mind.
an old
Just
black
kidding.
I was
and
just
white
going to say that.
70s.
Jeff, do you have do you have refresh or frame rate issues at all? You're probably catching every memory write in real time, but then you're overlaying that with your VGA generation, right? So you're pretty much getting real time if you.
I am getting real time. Basically, what's going on in the FPGA is that I have a 16 kilobyte true dual port static RAM, so that when I write to that, then or when the 2068 writes to it, the VGA frame buffer and VGA control signals can access the second port to push that out. There's also there's 32K of video memory available, and that's where we can start. I can start talking about doing 16 colors at 320 by 192, and so all of that's in there. It isn't tested yet. Right now, essentially I know that based on what I'm seeing with Frogger and the basic 64, is that it appears that all the standard Timex video routines are working in the FPGA. So all of that hardware should be ready to go. Two things to know about this board. The first is that's kind of a vanity project for me, and it's actually about 85% of the way to being a TS2068 hardware emulator. I just need to add a few more things there. I can go to a lower cost FPGA board. Right now, this whole board, if you were to fully populate it, would probably be about $110. But if I were to take some features out and use a lower priced board, you could get video, you could still have the memory, the flash and all of that stuff on there. And the cost of that would probably drop to about $60.
So when are you going to go into business, Jeff?
Yeah.
I mean, on the Dragon 64 and the Radio Shack Color Computer, one of the most popular add-ons, which are both fairly recent, are SD card adapters.
Yeah.
The Coco SDC, which also runs on the Dragon, and then there's a different one made in England for the Dragon. People love those because you can just load up all of your software library onto a single SD card, and using a little menu system, you can play any game, and you can write to it. It makes using the computer so much more pleasurable.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm sorry. That's why I've included an SD card socket on this board. So eventually I'll get around to writing a FAT16 driver that can be used for that.
Yeah, I like the DIV MMC, but that only works in Spectrum mode.
Yep.
Your device will work in the 2068 mode, and that's a lot more valuable to 2068 owners.
Yeah, I'm running the div MMC, but with the twister board, you got this big extension. It's like using a TI-99 with 3 expansions. You know, it just kind of starts dangling out there for a while.
Yeah, and me and Adam were talking about this actually ironically earlier today, and we were talking market standpoint. You know, there's not a whole lot of, that's why the div MMC works so good for the Spectrum, right? Because I mean, how much software is there for that? I mean, just boggles the mind, right? How much software is really for the Timex Sinclair? Now, granted, if there was a market for it and people could actually use it, then maybe people would even today, right, start building things for it to use that hardware. But what I would kind of like to see in kind of line with this is what we were talking about is basically converting a 2068, you know, basically it's a Spectrum, but right, the ROM calls are in different places, right? They move things around in the ROM. Well, if we could maybe put all that back or figure out a way to, you know, maybe they can't do that because the routines are longer, right? They take more byte space in the ROM, and that way you can't, right? And plus you know, there's just things that take up more space. So that's why I understand they move things around. But what if we had a 2068 ROM that had all the same calls as a Spectrum ROM, right, to the right place? And in addition to all the Timex stuff that they added, you know, the sound chip and all that kind of thing, and those routines, but some type of memory, not a memory management, but a go-between to make the conversion. You see what I'm saying? So when you load a Spectrum software onto a 2068 using the 2068 ROM, this would look and see, well, I'm going to make this ROM call to, you know, whatever hex address, and it says, okay, I got to convert that. So instead of going to the Spectrum address, it goes to the correct address in this TS2068 ROM, right? So it still does the same function, but now you can run your Spectrum software on a 2068, right? Without having to boot up into Spectrum mode. You know what I'm saying?
Carl, there's a guy on Facebook, Daniel Nagy, I think is his name,
Mhm.
who has done a lot of rewriting of ZX, the Spectrum ROM, and then tackled essentially the same thing for the 2068. And he's done some of what you were talking about, which is putting things back, right? And putting them in places that match the Spectrum. And he's got, I don't believe he has a ROM image. I'd have to go look at his GitHub again. I think it's a compilable file.
I just don't know. There's a ROM file on the Facebook.
Okay.
On the Timex Sinclair place site.
Is there enough room? That's my concern. Was
Right.
I don't think there's enough room in the 16K or the 8. No, it's a 16K ROM.
That's right.
Right. That comes with the 2068 to fit both. You know what I mean? To have all the 2068 stuff. So we would have to either. There may be room in the XROM, like Jeff was doing.
You got the XROM, so that's because you can run a Spectrum ROM unmodified in a 2068. That's essentially what these things are, the emulator cartridges.
Right.
Well,
So
and
that puts everything back, but you lose the cartridge support, you lose the sound chip and so forth. But now you've got the XROM that's not used, so you could move all that stuff to the XROM.
Yeah, and his file is 25K, so that's.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a little bit more address space on the Z80, sure, we could do that, right? We could match the ROMs up and have best of both worlds. But that's the problem, is there's only 16K in there, and to have all that extra 2068 support, in addition to, you know, all the ROM calls being in the right place, that's the main thing. right? The ROM calls are just not going to match up. And that's why all this software for the Spectrum is not compatible with the 2068. It's a simple matter of it's not calling the right place in the ROM. It's not that the hardware is any different, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, in this particular case, you know, I do have a Spectrum image on my flash, so I can actually drop this thing into standard Spectrum mode, and you could run Spectrum software that way. There are other things that could be done. The FPGA in this particular design has a memory mapping unit that can map the dock, the home, or the XROM anywhere in the 4 megabyte flash space, or in the space for the SRAM that's on the board as well. So there are a lot of things that can be done with something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that with the 2068 hardware, you really need to add some external hardware in order to do what you're planning to do, and also to stay away from that god-awful arcane bank switching that Timex decided to use. I know why they did it, because it kept the cost of the machine low and pushed all that off on the hardware developers. But speaking as a hardware developer, I really would like to find the grave of the engineers that decided to do that, and sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk with them.
I think they're all right.
I got a question for Jeff.
Tim was going to say something.
Well, I was thinking instead of doing converting a Spectrum to 2068 on the fly every single time, it might be possible to even get a hold of disassembly of that particular program, or in other words, do a one-time convert of a particular Spectrum game to the 2068, one time only, and then you've got it forever. There's no need to convert on the fly, so to speak.
True. And that's what Timex did. That's right. That's actually what Timex did, because like Horse and the Spiders, Horse, whatever, those are Scion games for the Spectrum, but Timex or somebody went in there and changed the ROM calls, right, to make it compatible with the 2068. Anyway.
And mapping those ROM calls are easy because it's already out there, the Spectrum ROM and the 2068 ROM disassembly, which I found a while back. So it's easy to map those two. It's just a matter of finding a way of disassembling or somehow going in and finding the right bytes, usually through a disassembler, and saying, oh, that ROM call, we really need this one. So, and some of the ROM calls they use in the Spectrum weren't right on those boundaries where they're supposed to be. They were a few bytes in. So when you convert to 2068, you got to do the same thing and then basically build up a table of, okay, this ROM call, is this really this ROM call, and so on. I've already started working on that. There's a lot more to probably go.
Yeah, and I know a friend of mine back in the 80s, that's what he did. I know I've got his paperwork, maybe I'll have to post it up, but he did the, okay, this is the ROM call for 2068 doing this, right? Here's the Spectrum ROM call. That's where the location is in the Spectrum. It's about 3 or 4 pages long, it's just all the ROM calls. And I think it's a pretty complete list, but I'll have to get it up. But somebody could do some software where you, pull in the program, you don't necessarily need to disassemble it, but you just need to see, well, if I'm going to call an address, well, I'm going to have an op code for call, right? And then whatever the address is. So you kind of look for those things. I'm going to call XXYY, right? So this program looks at that, says, okay, well, this XXYY, what is that? Looks it up in its list. Okay, that's this ROM call for the Spectrum. It's like, okay, well, I need to match that to this 2068 ROM call and then change the code, right? And then go and keep searching for more of those calls, XXYY call, or go sub.
You could do that.
Disassembler for that.
Yeah,
right.
Guys, can I ask a non-engineering question here? This turned out to be a design engineers conference call. I used to be an engineering manager, so let me get back to reality. I think Jeff's board has a lot of down-to-earth features, like I don't need to use the tape anymore. I don't need to use the composite video anymore. Or connect the, whatever we call this one, Spectrum Timex clone to a PC and have all my games or programs on the PC stored and play them on this clone. I think it has a lot of value.
Yeah. Especially because I think we were talking about it too, that if you made the board so that it would actually fit inside of the, you know, the 2068's case.
Oh, that so.
Right.
When can I buy it?
Can you put it? You can shove it into a cartridge form factor, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't.
If I can manage to fit the TARDIS form factor, yeah.
But I think that's kind of where it was going, was a hardware replacement, right, clone for the 2068 that had all this extra functionality, which is obviously what we want, because yeah, we don't want to ever have to deal with loading by tape again. You're right. We don't want composite video.
A question about, so this is basically like a Spectrum Next, but just how come they can't build this or work with the Spectrum Next and have something like this built into that? I mean, I know that thing's a different world sort of, but having used Carl's, like when he was here in July, he broke his out and I had never seen one. I knew about them, but I was like pretty amazed by its features. And we were loading some stuff up on there. And it sounds like what you're working on, Jeff, is in the same ballpark. I mean, it's, you know, and you said you've only been working on this for 3 to 4 weeks. That sounds,
it's been longer than that, but I do have a Spectrum Next, and there are 2 issues with the Spectrum Next. It's pretty expensive, and
I don't know, how much does it cost?
$350 or so. So it ain't cheap, but and it's also of, and I'll put this in finger quotes, relative unavailability. I mean, they go through funding rounds, so it's not like you can just automatically buy one.
Okay.
But it does offer the ability to run the old Spectrum games. I think and it has a 2068 mode, so it can do all of that.
I don't think it did. Carl, did it have the 2068 mode?
At the time I got mine, they didn't have a 2068 core. Nobody had developed one, so I don't know if they have one now. I don't think they do, but maybe.
Okay, I'll have to check on that. But the thing is that what I'd like would be a more cost-effective and available version of that. The thing that drove the Spectrum Next cost up is the fact that they have the nice case and the nice keyboard and all the rest.
And we know we don't need a good keyboard, so we're good there.
Right. We can stick it in the box.
There is another manufacturer that's making boards that are Spectrum Next compatible. I forget the name. I have to look it up.
The Next Go. I think it is. NXT Go.
Yeah, that might be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you made the board, go ahead.
Even that's like $300.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, not just the board itself. You want if you get the entire
keyboard,
shooting match. Yeah.
I don't know what they cost, but there's a guy in the Coco market who is 3D printing a case that looks like a Coco, and you mount in it a keyboard and a Raspberry Pi 4, and you run what's called Coco Pi. It's an emulator for the Pi that runs Coco software. And of course, with the Raspberry Pi, you have the SD card interface. So you can load over Ethernet or a serial port all your Coco software onto the Coco Pi. Something like that would be pretty neat for the Timex. Instead of eviscerating 2068s, you 3D print a case that looks like a 2068 and could have another board in there that has the hardware emulation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, yeah, there's not any more 2068s being made. So yeah, I mean, we don't want to, I'm not saying to cannibalize them, but I think that would be the good form factor to start out with, because then you can have still the cartridge support, right? If you have cartridges, that's the only machine that has that capability. Well, the TC 2068 does too, but anyway, it physically has the cartridge port. The Next doesn't. How are you going to play a cartridge on the Next? Somebody would have to build an interface, right, to plug into the back. Well, again, the 2068 already has that, and so you've got a mic jack, you've got the earphone jack holes in the back, maybe you could put a PS2 port or something like that where you could plug in you want to use a regular keyboard.
Mhm.
You have the holes already on the case, right? You could probably end up putting some kind of port there that you could plug in a USB or a little round USB thing to, so you could get it to a USB keyboard and you could use a regular keyboard. If you want to use the Timex keyboard, great. A lot of us want that nostalgia, that's.
Stuart was showing those micro switch keyboards before. You could use one of those with a Spectrum overlay.
Yeah, and you can buy Spectrum cases for days, but again, they don't have the cartridge, right? We need to find some place that could, make a 2068 case again.
Well, excuse me for being a killjoy. There are so few 2068 cartridges, and I don't even know where they come up on eBay every so often. It would be better just to have cartridge images on the SD card and run them off of that.
Yeah, that's true too. And yeah.
Which is dirt simple to run the doc file. The doc file format is dirt simple to use.
Yeah.
There's
I
already
guess
a bunch
it's
of docs out there, doc files out there.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's more just from a purity standpoint, right? That you actually have the real,
Right.
That's the way it really was. And I mean, you could put anything you want on a cartridge these days, right? And it's and make it into a cartridge program. But yeah, as far as official Timex, that's why we were kind of looking at 3D printing a Timex, the cartridge case,
Right.
right? Because you could easily put, a couple of flat packs in there nowadays, and all that's going to fit.
Yeah.
And then you could have hundreds of games on a cartridge.
Back in the 80s at Zebra, we were getting the Spectrum emulator cartridges from Timex Portugal, but they were meant for the TC 2068, and they were too
Right.
small to
Mhm.
fit in the cartridge port of a TS 2068. So we would have to use the bandsaw and cut the top off the cartridge.
Yes.
So if you look at pictures of the Spectrum emulator from Zebra, you'll see the top has been cut off, and I made up a label, and we just put a label on top, and we would probably, I think we use potting compound to make it a little more hardy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I have a Timex 2068, and luckily I have a TC 2068, and you're right. The cartridge, I mean, the case tops are identical when you look at them at your eyes, but it is taller, in the TC 2068.
Yeah, the cartridge port has different dimensions.
Right.
I'm going to interrupt you guys. We are at 2 hours.
2 hours.
And I think that I think that YouTube's going to balk when I try to upload this, but I'll figure that part out. Is this a good night? Like, what, I don't know. Is this the first Monday? This is the first Monday of the month, right?
Yes.
And 9 o'clock, I think is, for some of us it's a little late, but we've got West Coast folks and next to West Coast folks.
Well, the last time we had people that were like tuning in from someplace where it was like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning.
And
the Europeans.
Talking like Australia.
And we're gonna have to have a little international meeting time that's separate for those folks. I need there's like 3 or 4 folks who weighed in and said, can't make it tonight. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll figure out how to have a time that, that you guys can participate too. So the 2 most popular days were Monday or Saturday. You guys have a preference?
Monday.
Monday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Monday.
Monday for sure.
First Monday of the month, is that okay?
You could let Stewart have Saturday nights.
Because what I'll do is I'll just set up a recurring meeting ad infinitum. And then, and then we'll, 9 o'clock Monday.
Yeah,
first Monday of the month.
Yep, first Monday of the month.
Okay.
And what is the general time frame like? Because I just got myself a beer and was like telling my wife, like, I don't know how long it's going to go on. I'm having fun. And so is it like, because I know that we're going to have 2 people speak, and I think
we got both people. We got
right.
Stewart and Jeff.
Yep. And so like one of the things we were going to try to aim for this time was to have something for next time. Is that correct? Or are we going to do that after the meeting?
So what I want to avoid next time is round robin introductions, because we all know each other now, and that'll give us more time to do talk about the real stuff.
Yeah.
And
So
so
one question
Go ahead.
I have is, you guys seem to talk a lot about hardware. I'm more of a software guy. So who
Yep.
amongst the group is more hardware? Who's more software? Do people want to do any programming projects? Or so far, everything discussed in the email has always been hardware.
So
I'm just curious.
Well, you need someone to step up and volunteer to talk about software.
well, Jeff Fetta was just holding his hands up for
Yeah.
software.
I
I'm
think-
also a big software guy. Tim, I would love to hear from you about the QL stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, so I think we have topics galore, and
Okay.
and we just need people to volunteer.
Well, and I would also, as a hardware guy, I would appreciate maybe some development help on this interface, because there are things like, getting the SD card working and some other areas that you guys may have some experience with. And so as much as I hate to say it, being a hardware guy, software people are not entirely useless.
Wow, that's good to hear.
Shots fired.
What was your address again?
I'm in New Zealand.
And Jeff, actually you make a really good point, which is maybe we should have a separate hardware, meeting for the, the folks who are just really hardcore. And then we can, bring that into the general meeting on the first of the month.
Or just have the agenda be focused, this month is gonna, maybe odd months are software focused and even months are,
Okay.
And then folks could drop in or drop out, or not attend if they're not interested, or I don't want to be exclusive. It seems like there's interest in both of those.
Well, I have a question. I want to clear up a question about software. So you're asking, are we interested in writing software or using the software? What do you mean by that when you say software folks?
Yes.
I'm actually thinking more of a programming side.
Okay.
So let me ask this: raise hands of people who've actually read ZX Zine. The little easy.
Yes.
Read what?
Yeah.
So
read what?
I read the 6th one that was dedicated to the 2068.
Right. So I've done about six. Well, I don't know how many issues. It's called ZX Zine, Zine for e-zine,
Oh, yeah.
or magazine. And it covers strictly the ZX81 and 2068. I've done it now a few years. I'm probably late on the next issue. I've got to work on one. I just did another QL one, but I'm just kind of curious as people who've actually kind of kept up with sort of the newer stuff that's out there and the stuff that I've put out.
I have. I'm sorry to say I've never heard of it, but I would definitely like to read it.
Okay, I'll put a link on to the email. One of the things I've discussed recently was, so there is the guy named Boreal. At least there was the Boreal ZX compiler. Sort of, he does a version of Sinclair Basic for the Spectrum that is a compiler and lets you run, great code. I've actually taken that and essentially ported it to the 2068. So anything you can write in that for that compiler should work on the 2068. So if someone's interested in doing a lot of software stuff, that should be of interest.
Very cool. Yes.
A big thing on the Coco these days is there's a guy in either England or France, I think, and there's this software for the Spectrum that you can program games. And he made an interpreter for the Coco. So all these games made for the Spectrum, and we're talking like hundreds of games, are being ported over to the Coco. But there's nothing to say that that interpreter could be modified to work on a 2068. You wouldn't have access to hundreds of new games.
Is that the Quill interpreter?
It might be. I have to go look it up. I've been in the hospital a lot recently, so I'm kind of out of touch.
Okay.
That stuff, but I can ask.
Yeah, Timothy, my big thing is, I just want to get this, the Timex 2068 to have more software support, right? And I mean, we have all this software it does support it, but it's just you're putting square pegs in round holes. It will work if you get it right, but I mean, how can we convert or get those Spectrum software to run on the 2068 without, getting a emulator, card, or running a Spectrum ROM? That's because then that opens up a whole, I can just take my 2068 out and, put this new ROM in there, right? Because they're all socketed. right? They never sold any that were soldered in, so we could put new ROMs in there and basically change the functionality of the machine and open it up to all these other software. Granted, you're not using, like you say, you're not a hardware guy, but you're not using the sound chip, you're not using, the extra video modes, but you can run it directly, and then use the div IVE, right, with a twister board. But
there was
anyway,
very little software out there really used the sound chip.
right. Well, back then. Now I think there's more, in modern development, obviously, because that's a good chip.
I know there's a sound tracker for the ZX81. I have not seen a sound tracker for the 2068. And if you think about a sound tracker, think of the 8-bit chip music you've heard. Those are usually done with sound trackers on the Spectrum or the ZX81.
Right.
For the ZX81, it uses the Zon X81 sound card, or you use an emulator. But I haven't seen a tracker at all on the 2068, but it has the capabilities.
Well, don't forget later Spectrum software, with the Spectrum 2 Plus, and they added that AY chip into there, right?
Yeah,
so,
but I think all the ports are different. You can't use it. It's totally different.
But that's one of your porting issues. That's just like that. The effort to fix that is exactly the same as the effort to fix your ROM call.
And so I don't know if you guys remember a company called Knighted Computing. They, whoever ran that ported a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of Spectrum software to run natively on the 2068. There's a laundry list of programs. God knows where they went.
Are those still available?
No, unless somebody has tapes.
I've worked a bit with some folks in the UK doing preservation of Sinclair software, mostly QL. Tried to focus on American QL software. But it'd be nice to kind of get someone to work a bit more on taking people, especially who have older software still running on floppies. If there's a way to preserve that, convert it from floppy to .tap files, and making it and keeping it around. So a lot of older stuff that has all gone by the wayside. You look at an RMG catalog, you're like, wow, a lot of great stuff, but where did it all go?
Well, we actually have somebody who made something for that sold at RMG. Leroy wrote a thing called Make DOS 64. I was going to call you out on that. And apparently that was a thing that that worked with JLO and the OS 64.
No, it was for the Airco disk drive, and it worked with both Spectrum and Timex modes.
Okay. So all you have to do, Leroy, is convert that to like a tap file, right?
I burned it to a ROM.
In your spare time.
But anyway, that's kind of because I did software on the Timex. I worked with a guy here that did a CNC milling machine, and he bought a bunch of the kind of like what Stewart did. I guess he must have got like Timex's returns or something like that, right? But he had like, I don't know, a couple hundred or maybe even 1,000 of those machines, because that was the heart of his CNC milling machine. And he had a guy called I can't remember his name. He wrote Hot Z, a Hot Z assembler.
Yeah.
Ray Kingsley, I think.
Yeah.
Ray Kingsley wrote the software for the CNC milling machine on the 2068. And what I did is I wrote the software that basically was a diagnostics cartridge that we would put them in these machines. We'd set up about 8 of them at a time and throw these cartridges in, and I wrote the programs that check the SCLD, the video output, the key, you push all the keys just to make sure that they were good, that he could actually use that machine in his milling machines. And so, I've done the assembly language programming, Tim, and so I know, it's been a long time, but it's I couldn't pick it up, tomorrow, but it would, I've been there, but I've also been on the hardware side. And that was my biggest gripe with the 2068 was, it's a great machine, but 2 things. Number one, Timex went out of business, or they got out of the marketplace too early for it. And so it died. And then the other thing is there was no software. There is, like I said, there is, but there isn't. right? So people that have that machine, you know, what are they going to do with it? You know, all they can really do, unless they kind of are like more in this group, right? They know a little bit more. Yeah, they know it's a Spectrum. You know, they know they can get a cartridge and put it into Spectrum mode and then run that software too. But, you know, my idea is just to kind of give it more legs as far as, you know, if we can, or even with something like Jeff's doing, you know, that's another potential. But I think it's still, you know, use existing hardware, but let's figure out something that we can shim, you know, as they would call it, shim the Spectrum software so that it would run on the 2068 hardware without having to go through these, you know, other hoops. That would open up the, you know, the usefulness of the machine to a lot more software, right? And I think it would benefit a lot of people that are, you know, interested in the 2068, because most of the time, if you get one of these things, you're just like, well, what do I do with it? You know, you get some software and it works, and it's like, okay, well, now I've hit a dead end. I have no more software.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do like the idea of using the software that's available already, you know?
Yes.
Carl, a question for you related to that, and I'm sorry, I'm going to delve into a little more of the design space again, but what engineers do. How much, and also in maybe Tim as well, how much of the Spectrum ROM, after assuming that let's forget about the loading, let's assume the memory image is in there, how much of the ROM still plays a part? For most of these programs are written in machine language, right? So they're going to go directly to the hardware. So how much of that ROM translation do we really have to do once we get the image from Spectrum tape format into, say, 2068 tape format, or, you know, into memory? The example that I'm going off of, or where my mind is tricky. There's a guy in Portugal that's got a cartridge, a dual game cartridge on eBay right now, and one of the games on it is Zaxxon. And Zaxxon was never available, as far as I can tell, was never available on the 2068. It was only on the Spectrum. And I pressed the guy on this about, hey, is this do you actually have a Spectrum ROM in there, and then a copy of the Zaxxon game, and you got to do the out 243 whatever that code is. I forgot to bank enable that thing. And he said, no, it auto boots. And I said, well, it's not on your YouTube video. So he made a new YouTube video, which is out there. And he showed me, and when it starts up not at the startup of the game, but in the middle of the game. So it looks to me, reverse engineering from this brief conversation and looking at the YouTube video, it looks to me like he's got a cartridge image, which is like a .z80 sort of file. It's like a memory snapshot of this game loaded already into the thing, into the machine. And, you know, you can run the game if it's there on the 2068 ROM. So I wonder if it's a lot easier to do this than we might be making it. Does that make sense?
That for the Spectrum, if you get a Spectrum program written in BASIC and BASIC only, it should work on the 2068 with no problem.
Sure.
Very few commands that are different.
Basic, yeah.
Yeah. But most of the games are written in machine code.
Yep.
The screens are all the same. So in the few ports that I've done of Spectrum to 2068, there's really only a few ROM calls that they use. And you look at maybe 100 lines of code and maybe 3 or 4 different ROM calls, and that's it. Because anything going to the screen is going to be the same, because the same screen is the same on either machine.
Yeah, the thing to be aware of with trying to bring Spectrum programs into the 2068 is the fact that the 2068 is going to run 20% faster. And also, some Spectrum games rely very heavily on knowing when the raster interrupt occurs, and the timing is critical on how they update screen and other things. So ultimately, you probably get maybe 90% hits, but you know, there are going to be some subset of Spectrum games that'll just never port over right.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, we don't have a 50 hertz SCLD. Well, not in the North American one.
Oh, Well, I would like to say that it is actually amazing how much of the Spectrum software does work when you're using the Spectrum ROM and the 2068. I mean, you get the problems with the colors, but it works. I mean, you don't get to use a joystick for the games, but you know, you type away at the keyboard and hold the weird keys they decide they're going to use, and you can still play the games. And I don't use any of the other like utility software or anything like that, but I'm sure that all probably works too.
And Jeff, you said that your FPGA is kind of based on the 2068, the Portugal PAL one, right? Or is it the Timex one?
It's on the Timex one, but the video circuitry that I have, and again, it's designed but not tested. It deals with the problem of black on the 2068 versus the Spectrum, and so it should at least address that issue. As far as anything else that I've been able to determine with regard to the video, that's that and the 60 hertz issue, which is something that you really can't do in the hardware. The video between the Spectrum and the 2068 are basically identical at a relatively high level.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because, you know, on my Portugal machines, right, the SCLD actually has a 50-60 hertz jumper. Well, you know, it's on the board. It's never populated, but because they sold that in different markets, right, where they needed the 60 hertz.
Right.
So there is a pad there that you can tell it goes into the SCLD to change something in there, right, to 50 or 60 hertz. So that's kind of where I was at. You know, obviously on the American Timex, the 2068 here, that there is no such pin. There wouldn't need to be. Just like there isn't a bright output, right? Like there is on the Portugal SCLDs. So somewhere, I guess, you know, and at one point I had the schematics for the internals of the SCLD, because that's how I wrote my program, my diagnostic program to test the SCLD, right? I could actually see the gates and everything that it was doing inside there. So I knew if I did this, it was going to do that, right? But those were, you know, I didn't get to keep those. Those were, you know, he signed those out or whatever under NDA, obviously, right? And I don't know if there ever be a time where we'll get those blueprints again, you know, to actually really see, you know, unless somebody knows somebody at NCR or one of the Timex engineers.
Not the 2068 one, but you've seen the book where the guy did the Spectrum ULA, right?
Yeah. That one's similar, you know, obviously, but of course there's no bank switching, and, you know, Timex added so much, you know, they had grandiose plans. I give them credit for that, I suppose, but they just didn't have time to realize it, right? The market crash and other powers that, you know, people that make higher pay grades and made those decisions. So all that kind of died.
I think the bank switching circuitry is in the technical manual. I think it's pretty easy.
Yes.
It was dirt simple in my in our engineering emulator that I got going for David and my project. It would be dirt simple to put that into an FPGA.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't even know if we wanted to go there, because we don't need to do that, right? I mean, I don't know, do we really want to go to bank switching? Well, we kind of already have it in the machine as it is, but we don't need to expand it, right? The missing 253 is what's his name called it, right?
Oh, run far away from the Timex implementation. Run far, run fast.
On that note, let's call it an evening.
Oh, we got like 5 more hours worth of stuff to talk about.
I know you do. And it's very exciting, but some of us have to work in the morning.
David, thank you for setting this up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you everybody for showing up.
And so
on the West Coast.
And
I just want to clear up one little thing. So like you'll put out a message in like 3 weeks or something to say when the next meeting is? Is that what will happen?
Well, I'm going to set up a recurring meeting like with Google Calendar or something,
Oh,
and send
okay.
an invite to everybody so that you can have it in your own calendar system, and it's going to have the meeting link in it. Okay. So we're just going to have a permanent setup, and you can drop in. But I will send out about a week or so before each one, little reminder that says, you know, hey, we're up this week, and here's who's volunteered to do a show and tell.
Cool. I've had a great time. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you, everybody.
Can I ask one question?
Go ahead, Eva.
Does anybody know John Peterson from California, around Los Angeles.
Mm-mm.
Is there some context there?
No,
he owes me money.
He probably is now supposed to be close to 90s, but he was very active in, I think, Bay Area or South Bay Timex Sinclair Club during the 80s.
Okay.
Say the name again, please.
John Peterson.
So I was active in the, there was an East Bay group that was also involved with the Silicon Valley group. The name doesn't ring a bell, but I want to say there was a John Peterson that wrote for Time Designs.
No, he wasn't an author. He lived in Manhattan Beach.
Oh, that's definitely LA, so it's not Bay Area.
And he worked for, I think, Northrop.
Well, we'll track him down.
And he owes you money.
Guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right,
Good
thanks,
night,
y'all.
y'all.
Appreciate
See
it.
ya.
Everybody.
Thank you again, Dave. Bye-bye.